This is the Troll Patrol, live with Justin Freakin.
Welcome to the Troll Patrol live, where you can see a cat just hop out of his shit box right behind me as I'm taking to the stream. I did not oversleep. I just had a lot of shit to do. I've already been on an adventure this morning. It's been wild. Good morning. Welcome to the Troll Patrol live. I already said that, didn't I? We're going to jump right into it. We got two simultaneous confirmation hearings going on. Clubmentum taking the stage over here in the Pam Bondi confirmation hearing. This is the Trump cabinet pick for Attorney General.
And I want to talk about, first of all, the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Also going on right now is the confirmation hearing for Marco Rubio for Secretary of State.
Instrumental in combating violent crime, dismantling street gangs, taking fentanyl off our streets, enforcing civil rights laws after George Floyd.
But seeing Clubmentum, I had to go with her first, right?
Justice. Do you agree that it should be a priority to support U.S. attorneys, frontline prosecutors, and case agents who work hard every single day on our streets?
Senator, I think that is one of the most important things in our country right now. And there are so many good men and women within the Justice Department.
Pamela Jo Bondi.
As well as all the law enforcement agencies. Yes, they work very hard and they will be supported.
I'm concerned about some of the proposals that could put cuts in the COPS program, burn JAG programs. I know you're familiar with those. Senator
This would have been a lot more fun if it was Matt Gaetz sitting there.
Will you commit to continue to support those programs?
Just saying.
Senator, I will read everything about those programs because that is a top priority of mine, and I would love to meet with you on that and Senator Murkowski to support law enforcement and those programs.
Thank you. Independence from political interference is vital to the legitimacy and success of the Department of Justice. I was honestly troubled by some of the answers to Senator Durbin's questions. We will continue that discussion, I'm sure, on the committee about the election. But I want to focus on the investigation, charging decisions. As a prosecutor, I'm sure you had this experience. I would get calls from people, hey, that's just a kid, give him a break. And I remember one answer I gave was, he's 40 years old, he's not a kid. But that kind of interference is attempted all the time. And one of my concerns here, whether it's a call from a friend, a corporate lobbyist, a White House,
I mean, people would tell you I'm just a kid.
Generals of both
I'm 40 years old.
Clear policies to ensure the White House doesn't tamper with criminal investigations and prosecutions. At Attorney General Mike McCasey's hearing, he made clear that any attempt by the White House, and these are the words, to interfere with a case is not to be countenanced. Any call to a line assistant or to a United States attorney from a political person relating to a case is to be cut and curtailed. Do you agree with this statement?
Senator, yes, I believe that the Justice Department must be independent and must act independently. The number one job is to enforce the law fairly and even-handedly, and that's what will be done if I am confirmed as the Attorney General.
So you will provide an assurance to every member of this committee that the Justice Department will only follow the facts in the law and the White House will play no role in cases investigated or brought?
Senator, it will be my job, if confirmed as Attorney General, to make those decisions. Politics will not play a part. I've demonstrated that my entire career as a prosecutor, as Attorney General, and I will continue to do that if you confirm me as the 87th Attorney General of the United States of America.
In an earlier question, some of my colleagues talked about China and the risk, yet you have a nominee from this.
Good morning, Shelley, Lazy Eyes.
Kash Patel, the pick to head the FBI. I have serious concerns about him.
Once again, I did not oversleep.
Intel Division, which is responsible for protecting us from foreign adversaries like China, as, quote, the biggest problem the FBI has had.
Amy is showing a little cleavage here.
To, quote, break that component out of the
Are you
FBI.
wanting to be my Republican mommy?
I have not seen those comments from Mr. Patel. I would review them, but we have to do everything we can to protect our country. Again, Mr. Patel would fall under me. and the Department of Justice, and I will ensure that all laws are followed, and so will he.
Okay. There are many decisions made by the FBI director, having seen a number of them do their work, that can be made. While I agree you would be the boss of Kash Patel, I'm not sure that you would be able to intervene with every decision or position that he had or know what he's doing. So let's continue. Do you agree it is a duty of the Justice Department to defend the laws Congress passes? And will you commit to do even when the president may disagree with an act campaigned against its passage or called for its repeal? President Reagan's AG, William French Smith, said the department policy was the department has the duty to defend an act of Congress whenever a reasonable argument can be made in its support. So I'm specifically referring to the 2022 law that I long led that we passed to empower Medicare to negotiate drug prices, major savings for seniors. Will you commit to defend the law against the lawsuits from Big Pharma?
Senator, I was involved in Big Pharma cases when I was Attorney General of the state of Florida, and I will commit to protect the laws of the United States of America.
Okay, thank you. That would also, same question, with the Supreme Court is going to be hearing a challenge to the Affordable Care Act's coverage of preventative services. And despite the fact that you twice joined suits to have the entire Affordable Care Act invalidated, will you commit to defending this law?
Yeah, I believe this is very different. It's a very isolated, it's different. It's not the entire Affordable Care Act, but I will, it's pending litigation, of course, within the department.
Since the 1990s, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act has protected patients, providers, and facilities that provide reproductive health services. Will you commit to continuing to enforce the FACE Act to address violence and threats against those providing reproductive health care services?
Senator, the FACE Act not only
The FACE Act?
protects
Princess Kimberly, good
abortion
morning.
clinics, but it also protects pregnancy centers and people going for counseling. The law should be applied even-handedly. Yes, Senator.
So you'll uphold the enforcement of that law?
I'll uphold the enforcement of the law, Senator.
Okay, and I will ask my antitrust questions in the next round. We had a good discussion about that, and I do appreciate the nominee that has
Yeah,
been put in place.
Pam Bondi will be
for the
back
antitrust
tomorrow for a
division,
second
and
round of
incredibly
questioning.
important work that has to be done in that division. So
Gail
thank
Slater
you.
is remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank all of my colleagues for abiding by the 7-minute rule. Before I call on Senator Lee, I want everybody to plan on our first break would be about 11:50, and that would be 30 minutes for lunch. Senator Lee.
Or are they going to take a
Mr.
break?
Chairman, thank you, Ms. Bondi, for being here today. And I too share the assessment that Gail Slater is great. Had a great meeting with her yesterday. It just thrilled.
Black Lee is a piece of shit.
Willing to serve.
Because Republicans are not going to really grill her on anything, I say we should flip over to
about the Fourth Amendment.
Marco
Can
Rubio,
you tell us?
who is currently undergoing grilling in his confirmation process for Secretary of State.
Come back and do this again in 4 or 5 years. And that's not an outcome I think any of us would favor. By the same token,
I'm assuming this is the Foreign Affairs
have leverage,
Committee,
but they also will have to make concessions to reach this agreement. It's going to be very difficult.
and I would assume that Pam Bondi is in front of the Judiciary Committee.
Underpinnings to it are going to require a lot of hard diplomacy and tough work. But that's something that needs to happen. This conflict needs to end.
Well, I'm out of time, but I appreciate your last comment about the importance of leverage, and it's important for the United States to do what we can to help provide that leverage to Ukraine so that they can be in the best negotiating position possible with Russia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Senator Rubio, congratulations on your nomination to this very, very difficult job. I want to thank you for your previous service in the U.S. Senate and your willingness to take on this job should you be confirmed. And I also want to thank your family as well for their support for you to be able to be a U.S. Senator and to apply for this job as Secretary of State. And I want also to express my gratitude to all the members of the State Department. We have
Sucking him off really hard, isn't he?
choose to serve our country overseas, spend time away from their friends and family, and I can't think of a more noble calling. You're taking over a department that's very, very important to us. On Sunday, Jake Sullivan, the President Biden's national security advisor, said, quote, "The American people are safer and the country is better off than we were 4 years ago." Let me repeat, the American people are safer and the country is better off than 4 years ago. I don't know who believes that.
In a lot of ways, he's correct.
That. I think the election results demonstrate the vast majority of Americans don't believe that. We don't believe it at
Yeah,
home.
but the vast majority of Americans are
Inflation
fucking
has hurt
stupid.
Average Americans' pocketbooks. Open border policies have put Americans at risk. And I don't believe we see it overseas. In fact, Senator Rubio, should you be confirmed, you're being handed a job at a time when this country is in the most danger we've been in since World War II. It's a very dangerous time in the world, and your opening remarks demonstrate that you know that. We're not better off, and we're not safer. President Biden started this with his disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan that projected weakness and an incomprehension of what it means to have a policy of deterrence. Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine and started the largest war in Europe since World War II after that withdrawal. I believe it's because he saw weakness in this Biden administration. It's been the president's fear of helping Ukraine that has contributed to putting them in the untenable position they are today by slow rolling the weapons that Ukraine needs to be able to defend themselves. His incomprehensible and incoherent policy has caused him to handcuff American liquid natural gas exports while delaying tough sanctions.
Nayan Gayet. Did I say that correctly? Good morning, my friend.
Russian war machine.
I don't think it's the vast majority, but yes, the majority didn't vote.
Instead of enforcing sanctions on Iran,
just over half, I
Biden even
believe,
tried to resurrect the Iran nuclear deal.
eligible voters did not vote.
$100 billion in oil revenue.
Of the half that did vote,
During the Trump administration,
not even half of them voted for Donald Trump.
Iran's foreign reserves fell from $122 billion to less than $14 billion. That hampered their ability to be able to fund terrorists like Hamas and Hezbollah.
I will throw that out.
What the Biden administration has done is allowed the Iranian regime to enrich enough weapons-grade uranium to be a week or two away from having a nuclear weapon. And since October 7th,
Do what now?
President Biden has not supported Israel in the way he's needed. And because of the previous mentioned money that he's allowed the Iranians to have, that has funded the terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, our allies like Israel have been attacked. And we've been attacked directly. Thankfully, Israel's had the courage to stand up to these terrorists and take matters into its own hand. And it's led to the decimation of Hamas and Hezbollah.
It led to a genocide.
The amount of revisionist history can change the fact that this
And Hezbollah has been kicking Israel's ass.
the lack of support from the Biden administration, not because of the support from the Biden administration. And of course, let's not forget North Korea and how dangerous they have become, and the fact that we are now seeing North Korean troops in Europe. A thought 4 years ago that was unthought by anybody. And of course, one of the most concerning things is Biden's weakness has emboldened the greatest adversary we have on the face of the earth right now, which is the People's Republic of China. The People's Republic of China is the head of the snake of this axis of dictators that are challenging the United States.
By the way, apparently Israel is stepping up its bombing of Gaza.
Our security and the very way of life we have.
As we are on the brink of a
Beijing has
ceasefire.
each of the problems I just mentioned. That's why addressing any one of them cannot be done without making sure that
They bombed a school turned shelter and have killed at least 62 civilians in the last 24 hours.
when everything is a priority, nothing's a priority. And Senator Rubio, your top priority must be the People's Republic of China. Since the election in November, so this is all within the last 2 months, the PRC has hacked our Treasury Department, including CFIUS. Continue what has been described as the worst telecom hack in U.S. history. Sabotaged important undersea communication cables in Asia and Europe. Deployed ships to the South China Sea to harass our allies like the Philippines in their own territorial waters, simulate a naval blockade of the Japanese islands for the first time, conducted the largest naval...
There is going to be a news conference in Doha this evening.
Western Pacific.
So this may be the announcement of the ceasefire agreement. And by evening, they probably mean this afternoon our time.
Amphibious warship, and they've allowed Iran to draw down and ship nearly 3 million barrels of oil from a storage site in China. It's obvious that Xi Jinping is positioning his chess pieces in preparation for war. He's directed his military to be prepared to take Taiwan by 2027, and folks, that's only 2 years away. Now, it's true that that's...
It's already 7 o'clock in Doha, so evening could mean any time.
But it should be very concerning to all of us that he's given his military that direction. Because time and time again, dictators tell people what they're going to do, and then they go out and try and do it. The only thing that
should we get news of a ceasefire announcement, we're totally going to cut away from this.
Peace through strength. This was something Ronald Reagan understood a long time ago. And it's what we have.
This is currently the Marco Rubio confirmation hearing.
Xi Jinping is vowed to be the world-dominating power by 2049.
We also have Pam Bondi's confirmation hearing on another stream.
It's time for us to go on the offensive and abandon illusions about what kind of adversary we're faced. This is not a managed competition. This is a competition we must win. It will take more than an all-of-government approach. It'll take an all-of-society approach to be able to win this. As our lead diplomat, Senator Rubio, you are in a position to set the tone. And that's why I can't think of a better pick to be the Secretary of State than you. So, first of all, do you agree that the PRC is the biggest threat that we face as the United States?
The Communist Party of China leads the PRC, is the most potent and dangerous near-peer adversary this nation has ever confronted. They have elements that the Soviet Union never possessed. They are a technological adversary and competitor, an industrial competitor, an economic competitor, a geopolitical competitor, a scientific competitor now, in every realm. It's an extraordinary challenge. It's one that I believe will define the 21st century. When they write the book about the 21st century, there's going to be some chapters in there about Putin, there's going to be some chapters in there about some of these other places, but the bulk of that book about the 21st century will be not just about China, but about the relationship between China and the United States and what direction it went. And I think you're alluding to it in your statement. I know you may have another question. I don't want to eat up all your time, but I do want to say this. The Chinese believe that the United States are a great power in inevitable decline and that they are an inevitable rise. Now, they already are. They're going to be a rich and powerful country, and we're going to have to deal with them. The danger is that because of our own actions, in many cases, a dangerous imbalance is built up in that relationship. We allowed them for years to pretend that they were some developing countries, so we should allow them to continue to cheat on trade and commerce. We should allow them to continue to expand. They lied about not militarizing and populating island chains in the South China Sea and the like. We allowed them for years, before we got serious about it, to conduct grotesque human rights violations against Uyghur Muslims, as an example. One of the most horrifying things happening on the planet. And for years, no one talked about it, which, by the way, not just has a human rights component to it, it allows them to use slave labor to produce goods that, at the expense of the rest of the world. Talk about not just a horrific humanitarian crisis, but an unfair trade practice as well. We've allowed them to get away with things, and frankly, the Chinese did what any country in the world would do given these opportunities. They took advantage of it. And so I think now we're dealing with the ramifications of it. I agree 100% what you said, but I remind you, and I remind everyone, I guess I want to make this point, that much of what we need to do to confront China is here at home. It's not just abroad, it's also here at home. We have to rebuild our domestic industrial capacity, and we have to make sure that the United States is not reliant on any single other nation for any of our critical supply chains.
We don't need to confront China.
How are you going to explain that?
And we need to empower workers here at home because it's the right thing to do in order to raise wages.
It needs to begin here at home, and so that people from my state, Nebraska, will understand and get on board.
If we stay on the road we're on right now,
anonymously, good morning. Rocky, good morning.
Virtually everything that matters to us in life will depend on whether China will allow us to have it or not. Everything from the blood pressure medicine we take to what movies we get to watch, and everything in between, we will depend on China for it. They have come to dominate the critical mineral industry supplies throughout the world. Everywhere in the world, they've now established critical mineral rights. Even those who want to see more electric cars, no matter where you make them, those batteries are almost entirely dependent on the ability of the Chinese and the willingness of the Chinese Communist Party to produce it and export it to you.
You know, Elon Musk built the biggest electric car factory in the world in China, right?
To us on a daily basis, from our security to our health, will be dependent on whether the Chinese allow us to have it or not. That's an unacceptable outcome.
Thank you, Senator Rubio.
I feel like everything is like whether the billionaires allow us to have it or not. I'm going to flip back over to Maynard. Get the fuck out of the way. This is Pam Bondi.
Look, bluntly, to me, refusing to answer a hypothetical when there is clear and concrete previous history.
Trump's nominee to be Attorney General.
Chris Wray has done an outstanding job as FBI director at avoiding political pressure, and although he was
Senator
chosen by
Coons
President
from
Trump,
Connecticut.
he's being driven out so that he can be replaced.
I think
My
Connecticut.
perception, I've not yet met with Mr. Patel, by a loyalist who has publicly said he will do what the president asks him. Given that Attorney General Barr was asked to go find evidence of election interference and improprieties, went and looked for the evidence and said, I can't find any, and was then dismissed. I'm just going to ask you one last time. Can you clarify for me that in following ethics and the law, you'd be willing to resign if ordered to do something improper?
Senator, I wouldn't work at a law firm. I wouldn't be a prosecutor. I wouldn't be Attorney General. If anyone asked me to do something improper and I felt I had to carry that out, of course I would not do that. That's one of the main things you learn when you're a young prosecutor, is to do the right thing. And I believe that has continued with me throughout my very long career.
As we discussed, protecting American
It's a gigantic rock on her finger.
American intellectual property is a real concern of mine and of several others on this committee. I look forward to talking with you about that pressing concern. But the most important question I had for you today is whether you will be willing and able to stand up to politicization and interference in the Department of Justice. And I look forward to further clarification from you about the specifics of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator.
Senator Cruz would be next, but he's not here, so I call on Senator Kennedy.
Senator Cruz is not there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, God.
Ms. Bondi, welcome. Congratulations. Can we agree that legitimacy is important to America's criminal justice system?
Yes, Senator.
Dougie, good morning.
Can we agree that legitimacy is important to the Department of Justice, which in part administers our criminal justice system?
Yes, Senator.
And if Americans come to believe that our criminal justice system or our Department of Justice is acting illegitimately, that makes Americans less likely to accept the results of that system, does it not?
Yes, Senator.
And that makes Americans less likely to follow the substantive laws that we pass that are administered by the Department of Justice. Isn't that true?
Yes, Senator.
And if that happens, we have chaos, don't we?
Chaos.
And the social contract is...
Why do right-wingers always speak in riddles?
Do you remember a person by the name of Michael Avenatti?
Wow.
Several years ago, he was a media star here in Washington.
An attorney, correct?
Yes. He was a media star. And many members of our media loved him because he persistently bashed Donald Trump. And he was on TV every day. He was on CNN more than Wolf Blitzer. Do you know where Mr. Avenatti is today?
I believe
Federal
he's sitting
prison.
in prison, Senator.
He's in jail because he was a crook. And the Department of Justice helped put him there.
Well, if we put all the crooks in jail,
Do you remember a gentleman by the name of Sam Bankman-Fried?
Yes, Senator.
Boy genius.
no, he wasn't. Just a scammer.
So smart and so powerful that he thought he could command the tides.
He was just a scammer.
So smart and so powerful and so rich that he would go to meetings with serious people
Are we bashing rich people now?
like Bill Clinton, like Tony Blair, looking like a slob, looking like a
With his pants on the
fourth
ground.
runner-up to a John Belushi lookalike contest. And he thought it was cute. Where's Mr. Bankman-Fried today?
Prison.
I believe he is in prison, and I believe that's from the Netflix series I saw as well.
Because he's a crook. And who helped put him there?
The Department of Justice, Senator.
Can we agree that there's some really, really good men and women at the Department of Justice?
Many, many great men and women in the Justice Department as well.
What about the people at the Justice Department that were trying to put Trump in jail for being a crook?
Fall within the Department of Justice. They're out there risking their lives, especially the law enforcement officers, every single day.
Can we agree, though, that there have been and may be today some bad people at the Department of Justice?
Yes, Senator.
Oh, really now?
Sure, because for the last 4 years, the curtains there have been tightly drawn. But I think a minority of people there have delegitimized America's criminal justice system. The most destabilizing act that I saw in the past 4 years, maybe in the history of the department, is when Attorney General Garland decided on the basis of dubious facts and untested legal theories to criminally prosecute a former president of the United States.
Wow.
And not only that, this is the special part. He decided to do it after the former president of the United States had announced that he was going to run against Attorney General Garland's boss, didn't he?
Senator, are you referring to going after a political opponent?
Wow.
I think so. Now,
He did it after he tried
this is one
to
person's opinion.
overturn a legitimate election and lead an insurrection.
And I say that because, number one, this is America. That had never happened before in America. That's the sort of thing that happens in a country whose Powerball jackpot is 287 chickens and a goat.
What?
It doesn't happen here. And I call it stupid because it broke the seal. It broke the seal. It normalized it. There are a lot of ambitious prosecutors in America, Democrat and Republican. And I'll bet you right now there's some prosecutor in a particular state thinking about, well,
You know I lived through
maybe
Bill
I'll
Clinton,
file
right?
charges against President Biden's inner circle
Here, sir. Good morning.
for conspiring
Georgie, good morning.
to conceal his mental decline. And that's the road we're headed down. And you've got to fix it, Counselor. You've got to fix it. And here's, in my judgment, what I would ask you to do. Find out who the bad guys are and the bad women and get rid of them. Find out who the good people are and lift them up. But do it on the basis of facts and evidence and fairness. Because the temptation of some people is going to be, they're going to tell you, look, two wrongs don't make a right, but they do make it even. Don't resist.
What?
Resist that temptation. Help us restore legitimacy to the Department of Justice.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Ms.
Merlin.
Bond, to your family.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you
morning.
for visiting with me in my office. And I have to say, I'm sympathetic always to a former Attorney General, particularly having been one myself. But I am, I have to say also, really troubled, deeply disturbed by some of your responses and non-responses to the question that you've been asked today. You say
So once
the
again,
right
this is
thing,
Pam
that
Bondi,
you're going to be the people's lawyer. That's what you have
nominee for Attorney
to
General.
be here. But I believe being the people's lawyer means you have to be able to say no to the President of the United States. You have to speak truth to power. You have to be able to say that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. You dodged that question when you were asked directly by Senator Durbin. You have to be able to say that January 6th insurrectionists who committed violence shouldn't be pardoned. You have to be able to say that a nominee for the FBI director who says he has an enemy list, and that's just the beginning of what he has said in terms of politicizing, deeply weaponizing the FBI against political opponents, that he shouldn't be the FBI director. You know, we have some history here with your predecessors, Barr, Sessions, and others, who perhaps sincerely, when they sat where you are now,
Torchy, light one up, tip one back.
they would say no, but they were working with a president that expected them to be
Are you sure that's the best Kennedy quote, Merlin?
his personal attorney.
I can't
Do you really
to
think
have your cock in
that
my mouth.
you can avoid the
I'm going
disgrace
to give
that
you
they
the
encountered
blowjob of your life,
or
then I want
the
you
repercussions
inside of
from
me.
the White House if you say no to the president? And so my question to you is, can you say no to the President of the United States when he asks you to do something unethical or illegal?
Senator, first, I need to clarify something that you said, that I have to sit up here and say these things. No, I don't. I sit up here and speak the truth. I'm not going to sit up here and say anything that I need to say to get confirmed by this body. I don't have to say anything. I will answer the questions to the best of my ability and
Well,
honestly.
let me ask you, an individual who says that he is going to, quote, come after, end quote, people he alleges, quote, help Joe Biden rig the presidential elections, that he has a list of people who are part of this deep state who should be prosecuted, that he's going to close down the FBI building on his first day in office. Is that a person who appropriately should be the FBI director? Aren't those comments inappropriate? Shouldn't you disavow them and ask him to recant them?
Senator, I am not familiar with all those comments. I have not discussed.
Shouldn't the
those
Senate
comments with
reject
Mr.
him?
Patel. What I do know
Well,
is
I'm
Mr.
asking you
Patel,
for
what,
your
excuse
view.
me, what I do know is Mr. Patel was a career prosecutor. He was a career public defender, defending people.
He's a
and
grifter.
He also has great experience within the intelligence community. What I can sit here and tell you is Mr. Patel, if he works with running the FBI, if he is confirmed, and if I am confirmed, he will follow the law if I am the Attorney General of the United States of America, and I don't believe he would do anything otherwise.
Well, let me just submit that The response that I would have hoped to hear from you is that those comments are inappropriate and that you will ask him to disavow or recant them when he comes before this committee, because they are indeed chilling to fair enforcement and the rule of law. Let me ask you on another topic. When we met, I welcomed your support for the goals of the Kids Online Safety Act. And Senator Blackburn and I have spent a lot of time, devoted a lot of effort to
the honorable senator from Tennessee,
which had
Marsha Blackburn,
overwhelming vote of 91-3, 72 co-sponsors, including Vice President-elect Vance. I appreciated our discussion and your support for protecting kids online when we met last week. I'm hopeful that this area is one where
is that why we don't have Pornhub
we count on you
in the South anymore?
In working together to protect kids online.
Senator, absolutely, and thank you for that legislation, and Senator Blackburn. I believe in this world right now, we have to find the things we have in common, and that is certainly one
that
of
we all love
Senator,
Pornhub.
protecting our children from online predators. You've done so much on that front, and I thank you. I attempted to do that as well when I was Attorney General, but I am committed to working with you on anything we can do to protect our children throughout this country. When I was Attorney General, we started something called From Instant Message to Instant Nightmare, and educating parents about online predators. And that also, Senator, is one of the core functions of the FBI, the cyber unit. They sit there, these agents sit there all day long and investigate child predators. We tell parents constantly, you think
Ms.
you're talking
Bondi,
to another
I
child,
apologize.
and you're
I'm
not.
going to interrupt you. I welcome
Sure.
your positive response. I have
Oh,
one
go ahead.
more question that I'm going to try to fit into
Sure.
this round. TikTok will be banned unless it is sold because
In
it
like
has
4
been
days.
for the Chinese to collect information and do surveillance and endanger our national security. Can you commit that you will enforce that law promptly and effectively? And I ask this question because President Trump's pick for your Solicitor General in the Department of Justice went to the United States Supreme Court arguing that the ban should be delayed. Will you commit to enforce that law on your first day when you are if you are confirmed?
Senator, as I discussed with you during our meeting, that is pending litigation within the Department of Justice.
Well, it's pending litigation, but will you enforce that law?
I can't discuss pending litigation, but I will talk to all the career
Well, again,
prosecutors who are handling the case. Absolutely, Senator. Discuss with them.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Tillis.
Ms. Bondi, thank you for being here. I think I told you when we met, thank you for the time we met. I was born in Florida, have a lot
So
of...
we're going back to a Republican who's going to
follow
glaze her.
Florida politics pretty closely, and you've had a very impressive career there.
So we will flip back over to Marco Rubio. This is his Senate confirmation hearing.
The national security tool
Michael, good morning.
that unlocks, that designation unlocks to degrade the cartels.
Well, first of all, the designation of a designated terrorist to foreign terrorist
For those of you
brings with it a
who
host
don't
of
live in
legal to cooperate or work with them in any way.
Tennessee, Florida,
Their endeavor.
North Carolina, Alabama, Georgia,
To all sorts of banking
Virginia,
opportunities and the like around the world where it's
those states don't have Pornhub.
said, it's probably an imperfect tool when it comes to these groups that you're discussing, because these are
It kind of sucks.
they are terrorizing the United States, but they are sophisticated criminal enterprises, and they operate in the trafficking of people, drugs, and migrants to horrifying effect. Sadly, they also have basically operational control over huge swaths of the border regions between Mexico and the United States. That's just an unfortunate fact. and
Now
it's
we
one that
are
have to
on the
confront.
lookout for an announcement for a
these
ceasefire
sophisticated
that is supposed to be happening within the next couple of hours.
Have operational and functional control over huge swaths of areas that border the United States of America. And so whether that is the tool that we use, which is maybe the appropriate one, or some new one that we come up with, it is important for us not just to go after these groups, but to identify them and call them for what they are, and that is terroristic in their nature, because they are terrorizing America with mass migration and with a flow of drugs.
What about military force?
Well, that's an option the president has at his disposal. Obviously, it's not one that is in the purview of the Department of State.
Yeah.
I think President Trump is someone that never publicly discusses his options and leaves himself the flexibility to act. I think there's a lot we can and will continue to do in close partnership with our allies in Mexico. I think there's more they can do as well.
Apparently, Israel will be voting on the ceasefire sometime tomorrow.
My preference would be that we can work with the Mexicans on this issue cooperatively, because it is impacting their nation as much as ours. These sophisticated groups, these criminal organizations, don't simply threaten America, they threaten the Mexican.
Seriously, anonymously. I miss Craigslist personals.
Multiple presidential candidates and other candidates to other offices assassinated. You've had journalists targeted and assassinated for speaking out against these groups. So these groups don't simply terrorize the United States, they're terrorizing and in some ways undermining the Mexican government and Mexican sovereignty.
Oh no, it's Pornhub protesting
So my hope, in a perfect world,
the identification measures.
close collaboration with.
If you go to Pornhub, you'll get a message from Pornhub saying, we have blocked your access in these states because we disagree with this
you said in your testimony,
measure from blah, 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 blah.
economic warfare against the United States and our allies. We need to restore, as President Trump has said, reciprocity in that economic relationship and impose cost on Beijing for hurting American workers. How
I'll read it to you.
Counter that campaign. How do you think about the economic tools that the administration can apply to cut off the flow of American capital and technology that supports China's geopolitical ambitions?
Well, and again, much of what it comes to trade and so forth in this administration will be handled through the Department of Commerce, but we'll certainly have an economic undersecretary and a whole entire bureaus that will be dedicated to what we can contribute to that endeavor. So I'll just share my views broadly on it. Number one, I think it would make common sense to everybody that if by and large, a relationship.
Dear user, as you may know, your elected officials are requiring us to verify your age before allowing you to access the website. While safety and compliance are at the forefront of our mission, giving your ID card every time you want to visit an adult platform is not the most effective solution for protecting our users, and in fact will put children and your privacy at risk.
State issue, but once again, as a nation, need to prioritize the importance of.
So it even tells you to contact your representatives
to supply chains
before it's too late, and demand device-based verification solutions that make the internet safer while also respecting your privacy.
Or an allied capacity that's reliable and can't be used against us in a moment of conflict as leverage.
And then it goes on to tell parents how they can easily block Pornhub.
In the world, as an example, the Chinese.
Fucking the people that run Pornhub are pretty decent.
In Argentina, in Chile, throughout Africa. It's one of the reasons why the polar region and the Arctic region has become so critical as well in that regard, is because
I guess as decent as you can be running a for-profit porn site.
Port rights, etc., that place us at an enormous disadvantage in the long term. And it's what I said in that short answer is,
I believe you are correct,
Michael.
Michael.
Trend continues. We are going to wind up living in a world where much of what we depend on for our security, our health, our safety, and our economic prosperity will largely depend on whether the Chinese allow us to have it.
What we've watched of Marco Rubio has just been all him bitching about China.
Senator Coons.
Thank you. Senator Rubio, I look forward to this hearing and to our service together. Welcome to the other side of the dais, and welcome to your wife, Jeanette, your children, your family. Thank you for your service. I have three questions broadly of nominees. Do they have the qualifications to appropriately serve? Do they have a policy alignment with our core national interests? And do they have the integrity and character to serve? We may have policy disagreements.
Didn't we just see Coons ask Bondi a question?
The time we've served.
Is he on both committees?
My folks go back and look. We've co-sponsored nearly 60 bills together. So I hope we can continue to find constructive ways to partner. I have a number of questions to get through, so I'll try to move briskly. With regards to special envoys, President-elect Trump has appointed a series of special envoys focused on a wide range of areas. And some of these, I think, can genuinely complement, not undermine or distract from State Department's core efforts. The special envoy for hostage affairs, for example, Adam Bowler, I look forward to working with. As Senator McCormick asked about, there's a number of key issues around hostage taking of Americans. There's a bipartisan bill Senator Risch and I have on this that we hope to work with you on. Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, I think will be central to achieving an outcome in Ukraine that is a lasting and secure peace and prevents further Russian aggression.
Oh shit, Michael, they are
for special missions.
They are arguing the Pornhub case in front of the Supreme Court, like right now,
conflict or
like as we speak.
How will you work to ensure that state maintains its authority and encourage the administration to conduct a full vetting of any potential conflicts of interest and to ensure there's clarity of alignment with special envoys?
Sure. Thank you for the question, because I think it's a valid one. With the exception of Mr. Booz, who I don't know, may have met once but don't know, every one of the envoys that have been named so far is someone that I've worked with in the past and expect to work well with in the future. To me, the expression of a special envoy is critically important. Where it's most successful, it's on a complex issue.
You're getting a Biden farewell address tonight.
Expression of presidential priorities. So Sudan is an example of a special envoy, and Mr. Perriello and the job he's done there. And this is in addition to the fact that we have an ambassador and we have other presence, diplomatic.
You do know with the Supreme Court there isn't video,
so
right?
The way this will work and how I anticipate it.
It's just audio.
These envoys work for the president in coordination with us. These are all people, with the exception of one who I'm not disparaging. I'm not.
I'm a man of the people. I'll show you what you want. Let's listen to the Supreme Court justices discuss porn sites.
In thinking about it, that's because the distinction between facial and as applied really doesn't have any bearing on the question of the level of scrutiny. Is that right?
I believe this is Ketanji Brown Jackson speaking.
Whether or not the law is facially invalid, you have to figure out what are the relevant standards, as the court did in Net Choice, and that's the question we take to be squarely presented to this court now, and that's why we focused on that and not how the answer to that might cash out on a facial versus as applied basis.
Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Mr. Nielsen?
Let me see if I can get C-SPAN 3, because it'll actually show the...
Petitioners don't dispute that their websites are not meant for children, that they harm children, and that children are watching. The court faced the same situation with brick and mortar stores and applied rational basis to a law limiting adult content to adults. This case is the digital version of Ginsburg. 3 cases prove the point. Ginsburg itself applies rational basis where a store can only avoid liability by making, quote, a reasonable...
Oh, no. We need to go back to Bondi. Flash, good morning.
Who won the 2020 presidential election?
Bondi getting grilled by Mazi Hirono.
It's disturbing that you can't give voice to that fact. Moving on to DOJ's independence from politics. Ms. Bondi, if you are confirmed as Attorney General, you will take an oath to the Constitution and not to any individual, including the President. To start, I'd like to know whether you agree with some of the statements President-elect Trump made during the election, during the campaign. First, are the felons convicted of breaking into the Capitol on January 6th hostages or patriots?
Israel has killed 2 more journalists in Gaza.
As President
Palestinians are warned not to go into areas occupied by Israelis.
Of the felons that I referred
Israelis trying to...
I'm not familiar with that statement, Senator.
Kill as many people as they can in the last hours while they can.
Do you agree with that statement?
I'm not familiar with it, Senator.
Okay, no answer. He has also said illegal immigration is poisoning the blood of our nation. He said that in December 2023. Do you agree with that statement?
Senator, I am not familiar with that statement, but what I can tell you is I went to the border a few months ago. I went to Yuma, Arizona, and what I saw at that border was horrific, Senator. It was horrific.
Ms. Bondi,
I went to a rape crisis center.
That
If
is
I could
not my
finish.
question.
I went to a rape crisis center. Well, I'm not familiar with the statement, but I
get
went to a
to
rape
the
crisis
next-
center. I
let me
met
get to
with
the
Border
important-
Patrol
I have-
agents. I'm sure you've been to the
Ms.
border
Bondi,
as well, so
I
you
want to
could
get
answer
to my
that.
next question. So, I believe that you
This woman needs a titty slap.
from Senator Whitehouse, so let me get the response again. You said that the White House, if I'm putting words in your mouth, correct me. Oh, you said that the White House will play no role in investigative or charging decisions in the DOJ. Is that correct?
Senator, what I said is that it is the Department of Justice's decision to determine what cases will be prosecuted.
What role will the White House have in investigative or prosecutorial decisions of the DOJ?
It is the Department of Justice's decision, Senator.
So that sounds to me that you're saying that the White House will not have any kind of role. Meanwhile, though, you have an incoming president who said, I have the absolute right to do what I want to do with the Justice Department. And in fact, President-elect Trump considers the DOJ to be his law firm. I ask you this. If President-elect Trump suggests, or hints that you as Attorney General should investigate one of his perceived political enemies, would you do so?
Senator Hirono, I wish you had met with me. Had you met with me, we could have discussed many things and gotten to know.
I am
You could
listening
have
to you
gotten to
now.
know me.
Could you respond to the question?
Yeah, you were the only one who refused to meet with me, Senator. But what we would have discussed is that it is the job of the Attorney General to
I'm very
follow
happy to
the
listen to
law.
your responses under oath, Ms. Bondi. So I think it's really important to us that the Attorney General be independent of the White House. And you have a president-elect who considers the AG's office his law firm. I would like to know whether if the president suggests, hints, asks, that you as Attorney General should investigate one of his perceived enemies?
Senator,
you
I
do?
certainly have not heard the president say that. But what I will tell you is 2/3 of Americans
fucking ring is
have lost
distracting.
faith in the Department of Justice. And it's statements like that, I believe,
Ms.
that make
Bondi.
people continue to lose faith. If I am confirmed as Attorney General, it will be my job
Getting
to
on
not
to my
only
next
keep
question,
America
you're not
safe,
responding.
but restore integrity to that department.
Why don't we
and that's
move
what
on
I
to
plan
something
on
that
doing
you said?
every single day as Attorney General.
On August 25th, 2025, on Fox News, you said, when Republicans take back the White House, the Department of Justice, the prosecutors will be prosecuted, the bad ones, the investigators will be investigated.
She's far more well-spoken than I thought she
Is
would be.
Jack Smith one of those
This is the
bad
first time I'm actually hearing her.
as AG?
Senator, you hesitated a bit when I said the bad ones. Every decision
Sometimes
will be
badness
made
in the
the
eyes of the beholder. I'm just asking whether you would consider Jack Smith
Senator,
to be one of the people. How about
Yeah,
Liz
ma'am.
Cheney?
Senator,
How about Merrick Garland?
I am not going to answer hypotheticals. No one has been prejudged, or nor will
I
anyone
am
be
asking
prejudged
whether
if I am
these
confirmed.
are the kind of people, these are in fact the people that you would prosecute. I'm not
Your
getting an answer.
time is up. Would you like to?
My time is,
Would you like to
Mr.
respond?
Chairman, she is clearly not going to answer that question, so let me get on to,
Would you like to?
I do have
I'd love to
questions for the second round.
You'll have a second round. Would you like to speak before I call on Senator Cruz?
Is Grassley gonna die right now?
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's like gargling.
Thank you for
Thank you.
your long career in public service, and thank you for your willingness to take on
I'm sorry I didn't hit the content warning.
important office. You know, I have to say,
X-Rocks Fist, good morning.
there is a more important position in this new administration than the position to which you have been nominated, Attorney General of the United States. I thought the exchange just a moment ago with Senator
Clinically, good morning.
was illustrative. She asked you how you would respond if the president...
We are a couple hours away from a ceasefire, apparently.
It's rather striking because it's not a hypothetical.
Joe Biden will be giving a farewell address.
And I think perhaps the most
We're
tragic
currently watching the confirmation hearing for Pam Bondi.
Harris administration.
Yeah, you missed Senator Kennedy.
The weaponization of the United States Department of Justice. And we don't need to ask hypothetically because Joe Biden publicly mused.
We've also got Marco Rubio's confirmation hearing, and we have
Why will he not prosecute?
the Supreme Court listening to arguments about porn.
And Merrick Garland
He just started speaking.
sat in that chair and promised to be apolitical, and he broke that promise almost the instant he walked into the Department of Justice. If you look on the west pediment of the Supreme Court of the United States, just above the entrance, there's a simple yet profound four-word phrase, equal justice under law. We have seen over the last 4 years a Department of Justice that systematically targeted the political opponents of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and that systematically protected his friends and allies.
Yes, some senators have glazed
And it is
Bondi and Rubio.
loss of confidence in the American people, in the Department.
Others, like Cruz here, are airing their
I would
grievances.
note, I don't think there's an institution in America who has lost more respect from the American people than the FBI has in the last 4 years.
Supposedly, they have 7 minutes to ask questions of the nominee.
That is a grotesque violation of the obligation of the Department of Justice and the FBI. So I want to start with just a very simple question. If you are confirmed as Attorney General, will you pledge to fairly and faithfully uphold the law regardless of party?
So help me God.
Amen. Look, and I want to be clear for folks at home. I don't want a Republican Department of Justice. I don't want a Democrat Department of Justice. I want a Department of Justice
Bullshit.
that follows the damn law.
Bullshit.
And I think the American people do too. That shouldn't be too much to expect. Now, I'm grateful to President Trump for nominating you. I think on any objective level, you're clearly qualified for this position.
She is queerly qualified.
You have been a prosecutor for decades. You have been the elected Attorney General of the state of Florida, the third largest state in America, for 8 years. Let me ask you,
good morning.
in terms of your practice, how many criminal cases over the course of your career have you personally
How has your trip to the Pacific Northwest been thus far?
Handled thousands.
How many of those were before a jury?
Hundreds. I don't want to overstate, but hundreds. I was in a courtroom for many years. I tried 4 when I was an intern, jury trials. I think you had to try at least 20 in misdemeanor before you went to felony. Then you were in court every day, and I was also lead trial attorney for many years trying many cases, so.
And how many of those cases would have been before a judge?
Oh, hundreds and hundreds as well, but hundreds before a jury, I would assume.
And as Attorney General of Florida, how many lawyers did you supervise roughly?
Approximately 400, Senator.
Now, I also want to clarify something. During the course of this hearing, several Democrat senators have referred to you as President Trump's, quote, personal lawyer. Now I don't believe that is an accurate characterization. As I understand it, you represented President Trump as a White House special advisor.
Oh, also, Israel is bombing the shit out of Gaza while they still have the
Within
chance.
Office of White House Counsel, yes, Senator.
And is working within the White House counsel's office.
We've killed 70-plus people, including 2 Palestinian journalists.
Individually as his personal lawyer.
Absolutely.
How's it different?
You're working for the government. You're working for the Office of White House Counsel. You're not representing him in his personal capacity.
And so you have not represented him in his business affairs, in his personal life, or in any of the criminal trials he has faced?
No, Senator.
And you know, when it comes to weaponization, it's worth noting that in more than 2 centuries of our nation's history, no president had previously been indicted, no president had previously been prosecuted until the Biden-Harris White House came along. And in the last 4 years, we've seen Donald Trump indicted and prosecuted not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 separate times.
Because no one is
assassination
above the law.
Senator.
What does that have to do with anything?
Javert from Les Mis would be chagrined at the efforts of Democrats to do anything possible to take him down. And I believe the real target in this was not President Trump, but it was the American people, that these prosecutions were brought because partisan prosecutors were terrified that the American people would do exactly what they did in November of 2024 and vote to re-elect Donald J. Trump.
By 77.3%.
What?
Americans. 77.3 million Americans.
Oh, she tried to say percent.
You take your 33
every
and a third
day
chance minus my
as Attorney General
25% chance, and you got
to
an
follow
8
the
and a third
law.
chance of winning.
I'm following Al Jazeera's live updates, Mr.
Hold
Spronk.
the rule of law without favor and without regard to the partisan position of any.
This is where I've been reading from as I've been giving you guys updates.
Break. That means we'll be back at 12:25.
Here's the 2 Palestinians killed.
Senator Booker will be recognized to ask his questions.
I can link you in the chat as well. I was trying to get you to lay down, buddy. He ran away. We're going to go back to Senator Marco Rubio's confirmation hearing.
You've got Afghanistan, Russia, and certainly China as they talk about living in a submarine.
Which has all been about China.
Vector diplomacy, want to engage with the United States as the Russians and Chinese are competing for their favor. One of the first trips that I made after the election, the reason was Central Asia. There's not been a U.S. senator there in 13 years. 13 years to Turkmenistan or Tajikistan. Very important strategically. One of the first goals of the caucus that Senator Gary Peters and I created of Central Asia.
Good morning, Holiday.
To repeal the Jackson-Vanik label on the region and extend permanent normal trade relations.
I do not have a Dan Crenshaw eye pussy handy, so I need to go take a tinkle.
On your plate.
I will return momentarily.
Secretary, but I would say rescinding it would be a good faith indication of the Jackson-Vanik requirements that Central Asia needs right now to grow. My question is, would you work with me and Senator Peters to have your team work with us to remove this designation?
Yeah, and I believe the permanent removal will require legislative action. I don't think Senator Murphy has a bill on that as well. Yours is the 3 countries. Look, I think this is a relic of an era that's passed. There are some that argue that we should use it as leverage for human rights concessions or leverage to get them to go stronger in our way as opposed to Russia and the like. But I think in some cases it's an absurd relic of the past. I think it's Kazakhstan, who the Department of Commerce has already said is a market economy. In fact, I think they hosted the WTO ministerial just a couple years ago. So it's just they've met the conditions.
Yeah, it's something
so we will work with you on this because I think it's important.
Thanks, Mark. I think it's a neglected part of the world. I look forward to working with Senator Murphy on this. You know, that C5+1, which is Central Asian countries plus the United States. Hope we can work with President Trump, actually, to think about maybe hosting some kind of a summit there. Very strategic. After the withdrawal from Afghanistan, we need more friends in Central Asia, and look forward to working with you on that. In the time I have left, when I open up my comments, talked about all these conflicts around the world, sometimes we forget some of the most important relationships are right in our backyard, thinking about
Good
Mexico.
morning, Ilm.
With the nearshoring going on at the moment, a lot of production coming now into more of our time zone and hemisphere coming from China and so forth. Laredo, Texas is now the largest port in the United States. I think it's one of the underreported facts in our country. You talked about the cartels. They have command and control, certainly on the border at the moment. My question is, you think about Mexico, and you've been so active on Latin America and looking south in the United States, with President Sheinbaum now just coming into office. What are your thoughts around how do we become better engage with Mexico to help them with their issue as it relates to the cartels, basically, which are running the country, it seems at times.
Well, and I wish we had more than 30 seconds to do it, because it's one of those issues that I think don't get enough attention beyond the problems. Look, Mexico's economy in many ways is a very vibrant one and has made tremendous advances and continues to be a very strong regional power. They can become frustrating at times for us because they have enshrined even in their constitution, a sort of non-aligned, non-interventionist foreign policy with regards to some of the abuses. And so it's been disappointing, for example, to see the position they've taken with regards to Venezuela and others. By the same token, our economic interests are so deeply intertwined. I think there are 3 areas of friction. The first is on trade and violations of trade agreements and so forth that have been laid out, and some of the things that I've seen, even as a senator from Florida, in the agricultural sector, that are going to continue to be an irritant in our relationship that we hope we can resolve. The second is the security situation at the border. And I think there's great interest, and should be on the part of the Mexicans, to bring this migratory problem at the border under control. People forget an increasing number of cases. The people crossing the border are not Mexican nationals. They are people that are transiting through Mexico. And in fact, in southern Mexico, you have seen a significant uptick in resentment against migration by Mexicans who are bearing the brunt of the costs of becoming a key element of the migratory path. And the third is the violence. And this violence at our border has to be addressed. I think they pose a threat to the United States, most certainly. The flooding us with fentanyl, the criminal activities occurring within the United States, facilitated by these groups who have become vertically integrated. These are not the Colombian cartels. These transnational groups are now vertically integrated. They are the suppliers all the way down to the street level and all the way up to the production level. They are vertically integrated criminal enterprises, but they are also threatening the sovereignty and security of the Mexican state. And as I pointed, there are journalists and there are politicians who have been assassinated for standing up to these cartels. And it tells you the amount of leverage so they have over the government as a result of it.
Oh, yeah, they put a dude's head on a truck just, what, a couple months ago? DJ Dub, good morning.
Not allow them to continue their reign of terror, not just in the border region of Mexico, but spilling over into the United States.
Thanks, Marco.
Thank you very much for the edification of the committee.
Thanks, Marco.
A ceasefire announced in Gaza. Before we all celebrate, though, obviously we're all going to want to see how that executes. With that, Senator Murphy, you're up, and then we're going to take that short break.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I mean, no reason to celebrate yet because it's not been officially announced.
Senator Rubio,
you're waiting for that announcement.
A topic that I think is going to be real trouble for you and for U.S. national security interests, at least for
Thunder Monkey, good morning.
Minutes of my time, and that's the growing personal financial.
We've got more Marco. We got more Pam Bondi.
President Trump, his family, and Middle East governments. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. For
both committees are going to break.
8 years, the Trump organization
for a half hour. Pam Bondi's
real estate deal to build a hotel
hearing already broke about 5 minutes ago.
During President Trump's first term, the Trump organization actually voluntarily committed to refrain from pursuing real estate deals.
We're also on the lookout for an announcement of a ceasefire deal.
Those that are backed by foreign governments, and so the deal didn't go through, and then it remained stalled for the entirety of the Biden.
Supreme Court hearing arguments on a porn ban.
30 days after the November election, Saudi Arabia's biggest construction company that's affiliated
case brought against the Texas law. And we're getting a farewell address from President Joe Biden tonight.
Deal for a Trump property in Oman. Now, it used to be that somebody with these big financial business interests would come into government and take actions like setting up a blind trust or divestment in order to make sure there was no connection between their personal financial interests and the business they were conducting in government. But President Trump has just done the opposite, right? Over the last 8 years, while he was in office and since he's been out of office, he and his family have become more deeply dependent on revenue from governments in the Middle East. During his last presidency, Middle East interests sent about $10 million to Trump properties. After he left office, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who was his primary Middle East envoy, was handed $2 billion in investment by the Saudis, even though a Saudi investment board said the investment was a bad business decision. That investment actually comes up for renewal in 2026, giving the Saudis massive leverage over the Trump family. And then to make matters worse, right after the election, the Trump organization said that in this term, the president-elect's second term, it would drop its previous prohibition on doing new deals in the Middle East with private foreign companies aligned with foreign governments. So the Trump organization is going to be signing new business deals in the Middle East with private companies that have connections to foreign governments at the very moment that you are going to be conducting sensitive diplomacy in these countries. That's just extraordinary. Never before in the history of this country has a president been, literally receiving cash from foreign governments and from foreign companies that are backed by foreign governments in the middle of their term. If you or I had done this as senators, we would be in violent violation of Senate ethics rules. That's not permitted.
Apparently, Donald Trump very upset about windmills right now.
And so I guess my question to you is
that cat been wild this morning.
Do you see how this fundamentally compromises your diplomatic efforts? Do you have an issue, or will you raise?
What the fuck is going on with our feed here?
About his growth.
Open a new window.
Connection with the government.
I'm watching the Washington Post. Are you guys just broadcasting C-SPAN?
Or in any position to give you sort of any insights into any of these arrangements you've pointed out. You know, you mentioned Jared Kushner as an example. He's a private citizen, happens to be a Floridian. I don't know what, if any, engagement he has in the work that's going on now. I can tell you what I know. Obviously,
we got billions of dollars from the Saudis.
I can tell you as an example, the president's envoy to that region, who was charged, Steve Witkoff, who was charged with being an envoy towards reaching an accommodation between the Israelis and the Saudis, has been working cooperatively and together with the Biden administration. And in fact, I dare to say that all involved deserve credit for the ceasefire that the chairman's just announced. But Steve Witkoff's been a critical component of it, and he has been involved in it from day one. I think the broader consideration about whether we want to see a Saudi-Israeli mutual recognition and relationship would be one of the most historic developments in the history of the region for all the factors we've discussed here today. It would be, and one of the impediments to it has been this conflict and the ongoing conflict and the lack of a ceasefire. I also think it's going to be important for the Saudis and others to be participants in post-conflict stabilization efforts in Gaza and beyond. So all I can tell you is that what I've said from the very beginning, from the opening statement, and that is our foreign policy is going to be driven, as the President's made abundantly clear, by whether some action makes America is in the interest of the United States and our national security. And that's what it's going to be driven by, and that's how all these policies should be judged by, and that's certainly the job that I believe I've been tasked with executing on.
Well, let me then simply ask you this question. Do you believe that the president should refrain from doing new business deals with Middle East governments during his term in office?
Well, my understanding, again, I'm speaking out of turn, but the president doesn't manage that company. His family members do, and they have a right to be in the business. I mean, that's the business that they're in. They're in the real estate business. They've been for a very long time, both domestically and abroad. They have properties in multiple countries. So at the end of the day, I don't know, his family is entitled to continue to operate their business. The fundamental question is not whether his family is involved in business. The fundamental question is whether that is impacting the conduct of our foreign policy in a way that's counter to our national interest. And the president's made abundantly clear that every decision he makes and every decision we are to make at the State Department should be driven by whether or not it serves the core national interests of the United States. And that's how I hope our policies will be judged by, not what business his family is conducting while the president is here in Washington working not on his business, but from the Oval Office.
You are correct. That is the fundamental question, whether or not a policy is being pursued in U.S. national security interests or due to the president's personal financial interests. That is the reason why, as United States senators, we are not allowed to have complicated existing financial arrangements with foreign governments, because you do not want to create the impression that there is a conflict of motivation. And I just wished that this president applied to this incoming administration the same rules that we hold ourselves to as United States senators. Senator Rubio, in the time I have remaining, just want to tackle two other topics. One that I know is of mutual concern to you and I, and that's the need to confront China in non-military ways as they try to exert influence around the world. last time President Trump was in office, he was calling for pretty massive cuts to the State Department's budget. But as you know, China uses all sorts of non-kinetic tools like misinformation, economic diplomacy around the world to exert influence. I'm hopeful that you're going to be an active voice to try to make sure that you have the tools, including when it comes to combating Russian and Chinese misinformation, to be able to confront all of the ways, many of them asymmetric, that China in particular, but Russia as well, presents challenges to U.S. interests. Just wanted to get your commitment to make sure to build that full, comprehensive foreign policy toolkit.
Yeah, not only have I been someone concerned about foreign disinformation, I've been the target of it from multiple nation states. And I've learned over time that the best way to confront disinformation is through a flood of free speech that allows the counterpoints of view to be heard and understood. I think where we get ourselves into trouble, and we've learned this now, and I think multiple U.S. companies are now admitting, is when we get ourselves into a position of determining what's true and what's not, and then using the tools of government to go after that, particularly when it implicates domestic entities.
BB girl, good evening.
Yes, it is one of the tools that
Good
they
morning, good afternoon, whatever the fuck.
Disinformation. It's flat out influencing nation states' views of the United States writ large by promoting conspiracy theories internally in other countries that undermine us and that undermine our standing, whether it's in Africa, and increasingly you see it in the Western Hemisphere as well. And one of the best ways to combat that is to be present, to be there, to show what we do, and to brag about what we do. One of the things that frustrates me the most is there are literally programs within the USAID where they do not allow us to label it as made in America or a gift of the American people because it might offend someone locally. I think it's important for the world to know that what the United States is doing to help their societies, we do not do a good enough job of promoting what we have done historically and continue to do to help our fellow man around the world.
Yeah, China is spending $10 billion per year on that propaganda and misinformation operation. They celebrate when budgets get sent up to the Hill that propose big increases in military spending and giant decreases in the kind of tools that are available to you. So I do look forward to working with you to make sure that we've given you that full suite of tools necessary to confront our adversaries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
For being so nice to Marco.
Break now. I appreciate everyone getting.
They're probably all friends with him.
5 minutes because we've still got a long ways to go, and so with that, we'll.
God, a long ways to go. The recessing in the Marco Rubio confirmation hearing for Secretary of State. We've also recessed in the confirmation hearing for Pam Bondi for Attorney General. That hearing should resume here in about 20 minutes. They've probably been on break about 10 minutes at this point. Let's go back to the Supreme Court for a little bit.
Look at the very last paragraph of the opinion. That's when they're discussing whether
The Supreme Court is hearing arguments
Mr. Ginsburg had
on a
noticed
Texas law that requires identification for porn sites.
The court was very clear. To be sure, that was framed as a due process type claim. It was very clear that they said, no, you know.
It was a due process.
Well, they said very clear, you know what you're supposed to do. I would also point to the language from the brief that Justice Alito already mentioned earlier. I've not heard of a court limiting a case to less than its facts. And there he raised the argument saying, if this happens, I'm not going to be able to sell it to adults. And the court said, essentially, rational basis. That's how I read
counsel.
it.
Thank you. Justice Thomas? Justice Alito? Anything further? Justice Kagan? Justice Gorsuch?
One quick question on
I
Ashcroft.
was really wanting to hear from Thomas, old pube can.
In your view, because, and I want you to fill in the blank, and one possibility, of course, might be that the law there made it illegal to post, that is, to even create, to disseminate the information, with the age verification being only an affirmative defense.
Yes, that is one of them. There's 3 points on this. Again, Ashcroft 2 doesn't say what the burden was.
Yep.
So you have to read into it. One is that is clear from the opinion and Justice Stevens' concurrence. That's a big problem. Another problem, if you go back to the district court, was to do this, you had to have databases of credit cards. This is not the law in Texas. You can't keep the data, so there are no databases.
It's still not officially announced. We're waiting on that official announcement.
Because you can't separate communities under 1990s technology.
Apparently, a press conference has been scheduled in Doha in the next couple of hours.
Content that's not even obscene as to minors would be behind age screens. And that's a burden that is not existed here. We know for a fact that they can segregate by geography. When Texas's law went into effect, Pornhub left Texas. They're still operating in Louisiana with age verification, so we know that that's no longer true.
Thank you.
Justice Kavanaugh?
Just to follow up on Justice Alito's formulation, which I thought was helpful. So the rule then, age verification requirements generally permissible, but they can become too excessive, to use his formulation, or I think you and I discussed, or can become overly burdensome.
Yeah, and that's why I use incidental.
Right. And if so, impermissible, but otherwise they're generally permissible. And
YouTube.
I think that's the basic framework.
Yes, Your Honor.
I guess if you opened it with your dick.
Piggyback on Justice Gorsuch. This law is not too excessive or overly burdensome because, and fill in the blank.
Because it's less than in Ginsburg, and we know that because you don't even have to provide identifying information. So in Ginsburg, if there was a marginal case, you couldn't tell if it was a kid or an adult, you had to look at the ID. You don't have to do that under Texas's law. So however you read Ginsburg, we are less than that.
Thank you.
Justice Barrett?
Mr. Nielsen, there's been some discussion about what happens to the PI if we vacate it and remand it to the Fifth Circuit. Can you just say what your view on that is?
Yeah, so the view of Texas is if this court were to vacate the Fifth Circuit's decision, then the Fifth Circuit's stay would go back into effect because it was only the Fifth Circuit's decision that took out the stay. That would take a separate order. Now, I know that the other side is going to fight me on that one, so we probably would do what Mr. Fletcher suggests and go back to the Fifth Circuit for clarification. I ask, if anything else, that the language is clear to the Fifth Circuit that it knows it can reinstitute the stay. That gets lost in translation sometimes. When you get a decision from this court, they're like, oh, I guess we can't do that anymore.
Oh, YouTube, this is...
We respect the court.
A challenge to a Texas law that requires IDs for pornography sites.
The court is reviewing that vacated the Fifth Circuit stay. The stay would then spring back to life.
Justice Jackson?
Yeah, your last colloquy with Justice Alito suggests that your argument is that rational basis review applies to state laws that serve merely to screen certain people from accessing online content that they have no constitutional right to access, or at least it could be sort of thought of in that way. And I guess, neither party cited this case in their briefs, but I wonder whether this would run afoul of Packingham. I don't know if you're familiar with that case, but it's one in which we looked at convicted sex offenders who...
It's not just Texas. Pornhub
social media
currently took itself
applied heightened scrutiny
down in several states.
It sort of raised the same kind of dynamic that you say rational basis review would apply to. So I think we would have to try to figure out how the standard or the principle that Justice Alito articulated would be consistent with that case as well.
I confess I've probably thought I read every one of this court's recent First Amendment cases preparing for today's argument. I did not read Packingham. I don't know, Your Honor, but I do know that we are in the exact same context as in Ginsburg, so whatever the scope of Ginsburg, we fall within it.
And it turns in a way on whether or not we agree that Ginsburg was speaking to the burden or speaking to the age requirement as opposed to making the sort of initial determination that minors can't be treated or minors can be treated differently than adults.
I trust Your Honor on that one.
Yeah.
I would also say the other way that you could think about Ginsburg, of course, is that an ID requirement is just not a constitutionally cognizable burden at all, which would be consistent with some of this court's other cases and not fall within the Packingham.
Well, the Fifth Circuit didn't hold that, right? That would be.
No, Your
Honor. The Fifth
Honor.
Circuit at least saw that the First Amendment was implicated by this. And in fact, I thought they thought it was a content-based restriction, but that Ginsburg still applied to sort of have a different rule in this situation.
All I am saying is that you can conceptualize Ginsburg in multiple ways. We are okay under all of them. But if there are problems that way, I would urge the court just to think, well, look at the voting ID cases and that sort. We are paid under those line of cases too.
Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Rebuttal, Mr. Schaefer?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court. Let me start with Ginsburg, if I may. We've talked a lot about the fact that that opinion...
I can't do this right now. I can't take another day of hearings, especially if I'm going to do it tomorrow. We've got Pam Bondi again tomorrow. I'm going to be back tonight. We're going to do ceasefire coverage. Biden is giving a farewell address. We may come on early, especially if a ceasefire announcement is going to go on. So I'm going to send you guys over to James from the internet. It's going to take real good care of you until I come back here in about 6 or 7 hours. We'll hop on stream. Hopefully we've got a ceasefire. I'm going to get Sparkles to sing from a distance just as soon as we do have a ceasefire. Go ahead, light one up, tip one back. Oh, I can't do that in the middle of the day. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. However, that doesn't limit your options very much.